Have you ever felt utterly disrespected by someone you love, someone you've poured your heart and soul into? Someone who should know better. I'm not talking about a minor disagreement, I'm talking about a deep, cutting remark that makes you question everything. That's where this story begins. It's about my daughter, Amelia, and how she called me a clown in front of her friends. A clown. Not just any friends, mind you, but her rich friends. The kind who summer in the Hamptons and have opinions about artisanal water. Now, I've lived a life. A full life. Before I retired, I was Benny the Great. That's right, Benny the Great, event planner extraordinaire. I orchestrated some of the biggest events the world has ever seen, from massive music festivals to grand openings that shut down entire city blocks. I've worked with rock stars, dignitaries, and even royalty. I could turn a blank canvas into a breathtaking spectacle overnight. But to my daughter, I was just a clown. A relic of a past she was ashamed of. She always downplayed my career, subtly steering conversations away from my accomplishments. It stung, but I understood. She wanted to fit in, to be seen as sophisticated and refined. I didn't want to embarrass her. But then came the barbecue. The fateful country club barbecue where Amelia's friend, a woman dripping in diamonds, asked me about my former profession. I started to tell a story, a good one, about a particularly chaotic festival in the Swiss Alps. I was getting into it, painting a vivid picture with my words, when Amelia cut me off. She laughed, a brittle, dismissive laugh, and said, "Oh, my dad was in the entertainment industry. He was basically a professional clown." The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. Everyone laughed. Everyone except me. I looked at Amelia, and I saw not love, not respect, but contempt. Pure, unadulterated contempt. In that moment, Benny the Great, the man who had orchestrated some of the most spectacular events on the planet, felt like the biggest fool in the room. That night, something inside me shifted. The quiet, unassuming retiree vanished, and Benny the Great resurfaced. I smiled politely at Amelia, excused myself, and went home. But inside, a fire was burning. A professional clown, she called me. Okay. I'll show her a professional show. A show she, and all her high society friends, would never forget. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my identity, about proving to myself, and maybe to Amelia, that Benny the Great was still alive and kicking. So, what did I do? I decided to throw a circus. Not just any circus, but a full-blown, spectacular circus, right in her backyard. On the day of her precious garden party. Now, you might be thinking, that's crazy. How could you possibly pull that off? Well, that's where my years of experience came in. I had connections, contacts, and a Rolodex filled with the best artists, suppliers, and logistics experts in the world. I knew I could make this happen, and I knew I could make it spectacular. The plan was simple, yet elegant. Amelia was planning her annual garden party, the most important social event of her year. I was going to turn it into a circus. A public circus. A legal circus. I started by securing a permit for a free family festival on the street right outside Amelia's house. The pretext. A celebration of community spirit. The reality. A meticulously planned act of theatrical revenge. I then contacted my network. Within 24 hours, I had secured a carousel, stilt walkers, jugglers, a fire breather, and even a miniature elephant, all professionally trained and cared for, of course. The logistics were a nightmare, but Benny the Great thrives on nightmares. Every detail was meticulously planned, every contingency accounted for. I wanted this to be perfect. It was going to be a show she would never forget. So, buckle up, because this is where the real fun begins. This is the story of how I turned my daughter's perfect life into a three-ring circus. So, buckle up, because this is where the real fun begins. This is the story of how I turned my daughter's perfect life into a three-ring circus. And I'm not talking about a metaphorical circus, oh no, this was the real deal. Clowns, acrobats, a miniature elephant, the whole shebang. But before we get to the grand finale, let's rewind a bit and understand why a retired event producer, a man who once orchestrated spectacles for millions, decided to unleash his inner ringmaster on his own daughter. It all started subtly, almost innocuously. Amelia, bless her heart, had always been a bit image-conscious. Ever since marrying Richard, the wealthy lawyer, she'd been striving for this unattainable level of suburban perfection. The perfectly manicured lawn, the impeccably decorated house, the friends who all seemed to have stepped out of a magazine spread, it was all a carefully constructed facade. And I, her aging father with a past she clearly found embarrassing, was a threat to that facade. The little digs started small. Amelia would gently steer me away from talking about my past, particularly the showbiz years. Dad, they wouldn't understand, she'd say, her voice dripping with a condescending sweetness that grated on my nerves. Then came the requests not to perform my silly magic tricks in front of her friends. My granddaughter, Lily, adored them, but apparently, they didn't fit Amelia's curated aesthetic. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to her being overly sensitive. But the incident at the country club barbecue was the last straw. One of Amelia's perfectly coiffed friends, a woman named Brenda who always looked like she was judging my tie, inquired about my past. I, perhaps foolishly, launched into a story about my days producing a massive music festival. I could see Amelia's face tightening with each word. Then, Brenda asked, "So, you were like, a promoter?" Amelia burst out laughing, a brittle, artificial sound. "Oh, my dad was in the entertainment industry. He was basically a professional clown." The laughter rippled through the group, and I felt a cold wave wash over me. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the contempt in her eyes, the blatant dismissal of my life's work. That's when Benny the Great was resurrected. That night, sleep eluded me. The phrase, professional clown, echoed in my mind. It wasn't an insult, not really. But it was a weapon, wielded with the intention of belittling me in front of her social circle. And that, I couldn't forgive. So, I decided to give her exactly what she accused me of being, a professional clown. But on a scale she could never have imagined. Amelia was planning her annual garden party, the social event of the season in her little corner of suburbia. It was her chance to showcase her perfect life, her perfect house, her perfect friends. And I was going to turn it into a circus. A real, honest to goodness circus. My plan was elaborate, audacious, and utterly satisfying. First, I needed a location. Amelia's perfectly manicured lawn was out of the question. But the street right outside her house. That was fair game. A few well-placed calls, a little bit of bureaucratic maneuvering, and I had secured a permit to hold a free family festival on the very same day as her precious garden party. The pretext. A celebration of community spirit. The real reason. Sweet, sweet revenge. Then came the fun part, assembling the circus. My contacts in the entertainment industry are vast and varied. I called in favors, pulled some strings, and within 24 hours, I had a team of performers lined up, stilt walkers, jugglers, a fire breather who could make even the most jaded suburbanite gasp, and, the piece de resistance, a miniature elephant named Peanut. Peanut was a seasoned performer, impeccably trained and cared for, and guaranteed to steal the show. The logistics were a nightmare, but years of experience organizing massive events came in handy. Transportation, permits, insurance, I handled it all with the ruthless efficiency of a seasoned general. The day of Amelia's party dawned bright and sunny. I could almost feel her smug satisfaction as her guests arrived, dressed in their pastel finery, ready to sip champagne and admire her hydrangeas. Little did they know, their afternoon of refined elegance was about to be hijacked by a full-blown circus. As the first guests were arriving, a convoy of trucks pulled up on the street outside Amelia's house. The circus had arrived. Within an hour, the street was transformed. A carousel spun merrily, its calliope music drowning out the classical music emanating from Amelia's garden. The stilt walkers towered over the guests, their colorful costumes a stark contrast to the pastel dresses. The jugglers tossed their pins with practiced ease, drawing gasps of amazement from the onlookers. And then, Peanut made his grand entrance, parading down the street with a handler, his tiny trunk raised in a majestic salute. The circus music swelled, the crowd cheered, and Amelia's garden party was officially upstaged. I watched from across the street, a mischievous grin spreading across my face. Amelia's guests, initially bewildered, were quickly won over by the spectacle. They abandoned their champagne and hydrangeas, flocking to the street to witness the impromptu circus. I even saw Brenda, the tie-judging friend, laughing and clapping as the fire-breather unleashed a plume of flames. It was glorious. Then, I saw Amelia. Her face was a mask of fury, her perfectly coiffed hair slightly askew. She stormed out of her house, her voice barely audible above the circus music. "What the hell are you doing?" she shrieked, her eyes blazing. I calmly approached her, dressed in a custom-made ringmaster's outfit, complete with a top hat and a red tailcoat. "Why, Amelia," I said, my voice dripping with mock innocence, "I'm putting on a show. After all, you said I was a professional clown. A professional never disappoints his audience. Would you like some popcorn? Would you like some popcorn, Amelia?" I asked, the circus music blaring a cheerful tune that seemed to mock her perfectly manicured existence. Her face was a mask of fury, a stark contrast to the painted smiles of the clowns juggling nearby. But beneath the anger, I saw a flicker of something else, humiliation, yes, but also a tiny spark of recognition. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to see the absurdity of her world, the fragility of the image she so desperately clung to. The crowd was loving it. Amelia's meticulously curated guest list had abandoned their champagne and canapés, drawn in by the spectacle. They were taking pictures, laughing, even trying their hand at some of the carnival games. Her carefully constructed social hierarchy was crumbling before her very eyes, replaced by the simple joy of a spontaneous circus. It was beautiful, in a chaotic, slightly vengeful way. But this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reminding Amelia, and perhaps myself, of something important: the power of genuine joy, the beauty of imperfection, the value of embracing the unexpected. For years, I had allowed myself to be relegated to the background, a relic of a past Amelia deemed embarrassing. I had dimmed my own light to avoid casting a shadow on her carefully crafted world. No more. The circus was a statement, a declaration that I was still here, still vibrant, still capable of creating magic. And it wasn't just my magic, it was the magic of connection, the magic of shared experience, the magic of simply letting go and having fun. These were things Amelia seemed to have forgotten in her relentless pursuit of perfection. The next few days were interesting. Amelia didn't speak to me, which, frankly, was a relief. The neighborhood, however, was buzzing. The Vance Circus became legendary, a tale whispered with amusement and a hint of envy. Even Amelia's husband, Mark, a man whose life seemed to revolve around tax law and golf, couldn't help but chuckle about the whole thing. He even admitted, after a couple of stiff drinks, that it was the most exciting thing to happen in their gated community in years. But the real fallout wasn't the gossip or the sideways glances. It was the change within me. I felt reinvigorated. The spark that had been slowly dying under the weight of Amelia's disapproval had been rekindled. I started to think about what I wanted to do with my life, beyond being a grandfather and a quiet observer. The answer, surprisingly, came quickly. Remember those free community festivals I mentioned? I started planning them. Not as a way to further embarrass Amelia, but as a way to share the joy, the wonder, the sheer unadulterated fun that I had rediscovered. I reached out to my old contacts, the artists, the performers, the logistics experts, and told them about my vision: free, accessible entertainment for families who couldn't afford it. The response was overwhelming. People were eager to help, to contribute, to be a part of something positive. And so, the Benny the Great Community Circus was born. Our first event was a huge success. Hundreds of children, their faces painted and their eyes wide with wonder, laughed and cheered as clowns tumbled, jugglers tossed, and a miniature pony pranced around the park. It was in that moment, surrounded by the joyful chaos of happy children, that I realized something profound. Amelia's disapproval, her attempts to erase my past, had ultimately led me to something far more meaningful than I could have ever imagined. I had traded the shallow approval of a few wealthy socialites for the genuine appreciation of an entire community. And Amelia? Well, she eventually came around. Slowly, grudgingly, but she came around. She even brought her son, my grandson, to one of the community circus events. I saw a flicker of a smile on her face as she watched him ride the miniature pony, a genuine, unforced smile that reached her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to understand. So, what's the takeaway from all this? Don't let anyone dim your light. Embrace your passions, even if they seem silly or embarrassing to others. And never, ever underestimate the power of a good circus. It might just change your life. And if you're feeling particularly vengeful, it might just change someone else's too. But more importantly than revenge, find what brings you joy, and share it with the world. Because in the end, that's what truly matters. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a clown to wrangle. And maybe, just maybe, a daughter to forgive. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a clown to wrangle. And maybe, just maybe, a daughter to forgive. But the circus was just the beginning of the fallout. The immediate aftermath was, predictably, chaotic. Amelia, bless her heart, went ballistic. The high-pitched screaming could shatter glass. But amidst the screaming, amidst the mortified gasps of her country club friends, I saw something flicker in their eyes. Amusement. Curiosity. They were horrified, yes, but they were also entertained. These were people who lived in a bubble of carefully curated perfection. A rogue elephant on the front lawn, a fire breather disrupting their polite conversation, it was a spectacle. It was something to talk about. And in their world, novelty, even scandalous novelty, was currency. The next few days were a whirlwind. The local news picked up the story. Retired event planner stages circus revenge on daughter's garden party. The headline screamed. My phone didn't stop ringing. Old colleagues, friends I hadn't spoken to in years, were calling to congratulate me. Some were horrified, of course. Others were gleefully amused. The consensus seemed to be that Benny the Great was back, and he hadn't lost his touch. Amelia, however, was not amused. She refused to speak to me. Her husband, David, the poor, long-suffering lawyer, became the reluctant mediator. He tried to explain to me, in his calm, measured tones, the damage I had inflicted on Amelia's reputation. He talked about social circles, about maintaining appearances, about the subtle but crucial importance of fitting in. I listened, I truly did. But I couldn't bring myself to regret what I had done. Because beneath the surface of Amelia's anger, I sensed something else. Shame, yes, but also, hurt. She hadn't just been embarrassed in front of her friends. She had been exposed. The carefully constructed facade of her perfect life had been cracked, revealing the insecure, approval-seeking woman beneath. And I, her own father, had been the one to wield the hammer. That realization stung. It made me question my own motives. Was I really just trying to teach her a lesson? Or was I, deep down, trying to reclaim my own sense of self-worth, to prove that I was still Benny the Great, even in retirement? The truth, as always, was probably somewhere in between. I decided to try a different approach. I called Amelia and asked if we could talk. She reluctantly agreed to meet me at a neutral location, a coffee shop in town. When I arrived, she was sitting at a table, her face tight with resentment. The air between us was thick with unspoken words. "Amelia," I began, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for embarrassing you. I'm sorry for making you feel ashamed of me. That was never my intention." She looked at me skeptically. "Really?" "Because it certainly seemed like it." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I was angry. I was hurt. But that doesn't excuse what I did. I let my pride get the better of me. I wanted to show you that I wasn't just some silly old man doing magic tricks. I wanted you to see me as someone worthy of your respect." Her expression softened slightly. "Dad. I know I haven't always been the easiest father," I continued. "I was always on the road, chasing the next big event. I missed a lot of your childhood. And I know that you felt like my work was embarrassing." "It was," she admitted. "All those crazy costumes, all those loud parties, it just wasn't normal." "I understand," I said. "But it was my passion. It was what made me feel alive. And when you called me a clown, in front of your friends, it felt like you were dismissing everything I had ever done." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history hanging heavy in the air. Then, Amelia spoke. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "I was trying to impress my friends. I wanted them to think I was sophisticated and normal. And I thought that meant distancing myself from you." "It's okay," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "We all make mistakes." The conversation wasn't easy. There were tears, there were recriminations, but there was also a glimmer of hope. We talked about our past, about our present, and about the kind of future we wanted to have. We talked about acceptance, about forgiveness, and about the importance of family. The circus may have been a chaotic, embarrassing, and ultimately misguided attempt at revenge, but it also forced us to confront the issues that had been festering between us for years. It cleared the air, even if it did so in the most ridiculous way possible. And in the end, maybe that was worth it. Maybe, just maybe, the clown had inadvertently saved the day. So, what do you think? Was I right to hire a circus? Or did I go too far? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about family, forgiveness, and the occasional rogue elephant. Okay, so let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about family, forgiveness, and the occasional rogue elephant. That whole circus stunt, though, it wasn't just about revenge, not really. It was about something deeper, something I hadn't fully understood until after the popcorn settled and the last clown car had driven away. See, for years, I'd been living in this sort of voluntary exile. Benny the Great, the man who orchestrated spectacles that lit up entire cities, reduced to doing card tricks for his granddaughter, Lily. Don't get me wrong, I loved Lily. She was the sunshine in my post-showbiz life. But a part of me, a big part, was dormant, waiting for a spark. Amelia, bless her heart, unwittingly provided that spark with her professional clown comment. It wasn't the words themselves, though they stung. It was the dismissive way she said it, the way she seemed ashamed of the very thing that had defined me, that had made me, me. I'd poured my heart and soul into creating unforgettable experiences for millions. I'd worked with the best, the brightest, the downright craziest artists on the planet. We'd pulled off miracles, logistical nightmares that somehow, against all odds, became breathtaking realities. And to have my own daughter, the woman I'd raised, reduce all that to a punchline at a fancy barbecue, well, it felt like a betrayal. But here's the thing, the hurt wasn't just about me. It was about the art, the passion, the sheer joy of creation that Amelia seemed to scorn. She'd become so obsessed with maintaining this pristine image of suburban perfection that she'd forgotten, or perhaps never truly appreciated, the vibrant, chaotic, and utterly magical world I'd inhabited. So, the circus wasn't just about embarrassing her in front of her snooty friends. It was about reclaiming that part of myself, about reminding her, and maybe even reminding myself, that there was value, real value, in the absurd, the unexpected, the downright silly. It was about saying, yes, I'm a clown. And I'm damn good at it. The logistics, of course, were insane. Pulling together a full-blown circus in a matter of days required calling in every favor I had, twisting arms, and maybe even bending a few rules. But the moment I saw those trucks rolling down her perfectly manicured street, the moment I heard the blare of the calliope music drowning out the polite chatter of her guests, I knew it was worth it. There was Amelia, standing on the lawn, her face a mask of fury. And there I was, in my ringmaster's outfit, handing out popcorn to a gaggle of wide-eyed kids from the neighborhood. The contrast was delicious. But the real surprise wasn't Amelia's reaction. It was the reaction of her guests. They weren't horrified. They were delighted. They abandoned their champagne flutes and canapes and flocked to the circus like moths to a flame. They rode the carousel, they cheered for the fire breather, they even took selfies with the miniature elephant. Amelia's carefully curated party had been completely hijacked by a rogue circus, and her guests were loving every minute of it. That's when I realized something profound. People crave joy, they crave spectacle, they crave the unexpected. Even the most sophisticated, the most jaded, the most image-conscious among us secretly yearn for a little bit of magic in their lives. And Amelia, in her desperate attempt to maintain a facade of perfection, had inadvertently created a void that my circus was only too happy to fill. The aftermath, as you can imagine, was complicated. Amelia was furious, of course. There were tears, accusations, and a lot of shouting. But beneath the anger, I sensed a flicker of something else. Maybe, just maybe, a grudging respect. And her husband? He thought the whole thing was hilarious. He even commissioned a painting of me in my ringmaster outfit. It hangs in their living room now, a constant reminder of the day the circus came to town. But the real victory wasn't the embarrassment I inflicted on Amelia. It was the joy I brought to those kids, to the neighborhood, to myself. It was the rediscovery of my passion, the realization that Benny the Great wasn't just a relic of the past, but a force that could still bring wonder to the world. And that's why, after all the drama, after all the popcorn and elephants, I started organizing free community festivals for children. I wanted to share that magic, that joy, with as many people as possible. Because in the end, that's what it's all about. Not revenge, not proving a point, but creating something beautiful, something unforgettable, something that makes the world a little bit brighter. So, if you ever find yourself feeling like a professional clown, remember this, embrace it. Own it. And put on the best damn show you possibly can. Because you never know who might need a little bit of circus in their lives. And who knows, maybe even your daughter will come around eventually. Because you never know who might need a little bit of circus in their lives. And who knows, maybe even your daughter will come around eventually. That's what I told myself anyway, as I watched the miniature elephant lumber back onto its trailer, the echoes of calliope music slowly fading into the suburban hum. The garden party was over. Amelia's perfect facade, shattered. My own heart, a strange mixture of vindication and a lingering ache. The aftermath was complicated. The neighborhood was buzzing, of course. The Vance Circus, as it quickly became known, was the talk of every coffee klatch and cocktail hour. Some were appalled, whispering about my unhinged behavior and Amelia's mortification. Others, surprisingly, were delighted. They'd seen through Amelia's carefully constructed image for years, sensing the forced smiles and the subtle snobbery. For them, the circus was a breath of fresh, chaotic air, a joyous rebellion against the suffocating perfection. Even Amelia's husband, David, found a twisted sort of humor in it all. He'd always been a bit of a good-natured goofball trapped in a lawyer's suit, and I suspect he secretly enjoyed the chaos. He even thanked me, quietly, for shaking things up. He said Amelia needed to come down a peg or two, that she'd been taking herself far too seriously. But Amelia was devastated. The laughter, the pointing fingers, the whispers, they were her worst nightmare come to life. She wouldn't speak to me, wouldn't even acknowledge my existence. I tried to apologize, to explain that it wasn't about hurting her, but about something else. About reclaiming a part of myself I thought I'd lost. About proving that Benny the Great wasn't just some embarrassing relic of the past. But she wouldn't listen. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between us was deafening. I started to regret my actions. Had I gone too far? Had I sacrificed my relationship with my daughter for a fleeting moment of revenge? The image of her face, contorted with rage and humiliation, haunted my dreams. Then, one afternoon, my granddaughter, Lily, came to visit. She's always been my little ray of sunshine, a miniature version of Amelia but with a heart as big as the circus tent I'd erected on her mother's lawn. "Grandpa," she said, tugging on my sleeve, "Mommy's sad." That was it. That was the crack in my resolve. I couldn't bear to see my daughter unhappy, especially not because of something I'd done. I knew I had to do something, anything, to make things right. So, I did what any self-respecting, retired event planner would do. I planned another event. But this time, it wasn't about revenge. It was about reconciliation. I called David, Amelia's husband, and explained my idea. He was hesitant at first, but eventually, he agreed to help. We secretly arranged a small dinner party at their house, inviting only Amelia's closest friends, the ones who had witnessed the circus debacle firsthand. When Amelia arrived home that evening, she was surprised to see the cars parked in her driveway. She walked into the house, her face etched with suspicion, and found her friends gathered around the dining room table. I was there too, standing nervously by the fireplace. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice tight with apprehension. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Amelia," I said, "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I let my pride get the better of me, and I hurt you. That was never my intention." I paused, searching for the right words. "I wanted to show you that I was more than just a clown, but I ended up acting like one. I hope you can forgive me." Then, I pulled out a small, velvet box from my pocket. Inside was a vintage music box, shaped like a miniature circus carousel. I wound it up, and the familiar calliope music filled the room. "This," I said, "is a reminder of that day. But it's also a reminder that even in the midst of chaos and embarrassment, there can be joy and laughter. And that family, no matter how messy, is the most important thing of all." Amelia looked at the music box, her eyes welling up with tears. She reached out and took it from my hand, her fingers brushing against mine. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, not yet. But it was a start. And as I watched her smile, a genuine smile that reached her eyes, I knew that maybe, just maybe, the circus had brought us closer together after all. Because sometimes, it takes a little bit of absurdity to remind us of what truly matters. And who knows, maybe that clown had a point after all. The show must go on, and sometimes, that show is about forgiveness, understanding, and a whole lot of love. What's your craziest family story? Share it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales of unexpected twists and turns. Okay, here we go. Share it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales of unexpected twists and turns. So, where were we? Ah yes, the popcorn. Amelia's face, the color of a ripe tomato, was a sight to behold. The audacity. The sheer, unmitigated gall of me, her father, dressed as a ringmaster, handing out popcorn to the neighborhood kids right in front of her meticulously curated, sophisticated garden party. The irony, of course, was thicker than the elephant's hide. She'd called me a clown, and I'd delivered a circus, right to her doorstep. Or rather, to her perfectly manicured lawn. But let's rewind a bit, shall we? To truly appreciate the chaos, you need to understand the build-up. It wasn't just the clown comment, though that was the spark that lit the fuse. It was the years of subtle digs, the thinly veiled embarrassment whenever I dared to recount my past life, my glory days as Benny the Great, the event producer extraordinaire. To Amelia, that was ancient history, a relic best left buried. She wanted me to be invisible. A quiet, unassuming grandfather who wouldn't dare to disrupt her carefully constructed world of country club memberships and champagne brunches. The country club barbecue was the tipping point. I was actually enjoying myself, regaling a small group with a story about a particularly chaotic festival I'd organized back in the day. Helicopters, rogue llamas, a near riot over a misprinted t-shirt, good times, truly. Amelia swooped in, her smile strained, her eyes flashing a warning. "Oh, my dad was in the entertainment industry," she chirped, her voice dripping with condescension. "He was basically a professional clown." The laughter stung. It wasn't the laughter itself, though that was unpleasant. It was the look on Amelia's face, the barely concealed contempt. That's when Benny the Great stirred from his slumber. He'd been dormant for years, content to perform simple card tricks for my granddaughter, Lily. But that night, the old fire ignited. I knew, in that instant, that I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let her erase me, rewrite my history, diminish my accomplishments. The plan began to form, a deliciously wicked scheme that would utilize all my skills and connections. Amelia's annual garden party was fast approaching, her social event of the year. The perfect stage for my performance. I started making calls, reactivating old contacts, pulling strings I hadn't touched in decades. The logistics were daunting, but thrilling. Permits, performers, equipment, it was like orchestrating a mini-festival, but with a very specific, very personal, goal in mind. The Free Family Festival permit was the key. A community event, ostensibly for the children of the neighborhood, held on the street directly in front of Amelia's house. Perfectly legal, perfectly public, and perfectly timed to coincide with her garden party. The trucks arrived early that morning, a veritable circus caravan. The transformation was breathtaking. A carousel, spinning and gleaming in the sun. Stilt walkers, towering over the manicured hedges. Jugglers, tossing brightly colored balls with impossible grace. A fire breather, practicing his fiery art with controlled precision. And yes, even a miniature elephant, a gentle giant named Peanut, trained and cared for by a reputable animal handler. The music started, a cheerful, boisterous cacophony that completely overwhelmed the polite classical music emanating from Amelia's party. Her guests, initially confused, were quickly drawn to the spectacle. Champagne flutes were abandoned, canapés forgotten. They flocked to the street, captivated by the unexpected entertainment. Amelia's perfect party was crumbling before her very eyes. That's when she emerged, her face a mask of fury. "What the hell are you doing?" she screamed, her voice barely audible above the circus music. I turned, my ringmaster's smile wide and genuine. "I said you were a professional clown, Amelia," I replied, my voice booming with theatrical flair. A professional never disappoints his audience. "Would you like some popcorn?" The aftermath was interesting. Amelia was, understandably, mortified. She became the talk of the neighborhood, the subject of hushed whispers and knowing glances. Her husband, bless his heart, actually found the whole thing hilarious. He even bought me a "World's Best Grandpa" mug. Amelia's meticulously crafted image, her carefully constructed facade of suburban perfection, was shattered. But something unexpected happened. The Vance Circus, as it became known, brought joy to the neighborhood. The kids loved it, the parents loved it, even some of Amelia's guests secretly loved it. And me? I rediscovered my passion. I realized that the joy I brought to hundreds of strangers was far more valuable than the approval of one ungrateful daughter. I started organizing free community festivals, bringing music and laughter and a little bit of magic to those who needed it most. The lesson? Don't underestimate a sleeping giant. And never, ever, call a retired event producer a clown. You might just get a circus. So, tell me, have you ever felt underestimated? What did you do about it? Share your stories in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales of unexpected twists and turns. Okay, here we go. Last time, I left you hanging, right? My own daughter, Amelia, called me a clown in front of her snooty friends. A clown. Benny the Great, reduced to, well, a joke. But jokes have punchlines, and this one was about to be a doozy. You see, Amelia, bless her heart, is all about appearances. Her life is a carefully curated Instagram feed, filled with perfectly manicured lawns, designer handbags, and friends who all seem to have the same plastic surgeon. Me. I'm more comfortable pulling rabbits out of hats than discussing the merits of various Chardonnay vintages. I tried, I really did. But I could always feel her cringing whenever I launched into one of my old stories about touring with The Who or wrangling pyrotechnics for a stadium show. To her, it was embarrassing. To me, it was life. But the clown comment. That stung. It wasn't just the words, it was the look in her eyes, the way she dismissed my entire life's work with a flick of her wrist. That's when Benny the Great, the showman, the orchestrator of the impossible, woke up from his peaceful retirement. He wasn't going to let that stand. He wasn't going to let her shame him. He was going to give her a show she wouldn't forget. My plan started, innocently enough, with a city permit. Amelia's annual garden party was coming up, the social event of the season in her little suburban bubble. The who's who of lawyers, doctors, and, well, other people with a lot of money were going to be there. And I, being her father, was invited. Or, more accurately, tolerated. That party was her Everest, and I was about to plant a giant, brightly colored flag right on top. The permit was for a community family festival, to be held on the street right outside her house. Perfectly legal, perfectly above board. I even made sure to get all the necessary approvals from the neighborhood association. They loved the idea. Free entertainment for the kids, a chance to mingle, what's not to like? Amelia, of course, was furious when she found out, but there wasn't a thing she could do about it. The wheels were in motion. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. I was like a kid before Christmas, buzzing with anticipation. I spent hours double-checking the logistics, making sure everything was perfect. The carousel had been inspected, the stilt walkers were rehearsed, the fire breather had his permits, and even the miniature elephant, a perfectly trained and ethically sourced animal, I assure you, was ready to go. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about delivering a world-class show. It was in my blood. The day of the party dawned bright and sunny, perfect for a garden gathering, and a circus. I could practically taste Amelia's impending humiliation. As her guests began to arrive, dressed in their pastel finery and clutching glasses of champagne, the trucks started rolling in. One by one, they unloaded their colorful cargo, transforming the quiet suburban street into a vibrant, chaotic spectacle. The music started, a cheerful, upbeat tune that drowned out the polite chatter and classical music emanating from Amelia's garden. Kids started pouring out of their houses, drawn by the sights and sounds. The carousel began to spin, the stilt walkers towered over the crowd, and the smell of popcorn filled the air. It was a circus, a real, honest to goodness circus, right in Amelia's front yard. And then, the piece de resistance, me. I emerged, dressed in a custom-made ringmaster's outfit, complete with a top hat, tails, and a booming voice that could command a stadium. I greeted the guests with a flourish, handing out popcorn and directing them to the various attractions. The looks on their faces were priceless. amusement, bewilderment, and a healthy dose of schadenfreude. Amelia, of course, was apoplectic. She stormed out of the house, her face red with rage, and confronted me. "What the hell are you doing?" she screamed, her voice barely audible above the circus music. I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "I heard you say I was a professional clown, darling. A professional never disappoints his audience. Would you like some popcorn, Amelia?" The look on her face, well, it was worth all the effort. She sputtered, she stammered, she tried to regain control, but it was too late. The circus had taken over, and Amelia's perfect party was a distant memory. Her husband, to his credit, actually found the whole thing hilarious. He even took a ride on the carousel. The aftermath? Let's just say Amelia wasn't thrilled. But the neighborhood loved it. The Vance Circus became a local legend. And me? I reconnected with my passion. I started organizing free community festivals for kids, bringing joy and wonder to hundreds of strangers. I realized that the laughter of those children was worth more than all the approval in Amelia's social circle. In the end, it wasn't just about getting even. It was about remembering who I was, and what I loved. So, what's the lesson here? Maybe it's that you should never underestimate a retired showman. Or maybe it's that sometimes, the best revenge is a good show. Or maybe, just maybe, it's that family is complicated, and sometimes you have to embrace the chaos and find the joy in the unexpected. Share your stories in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales of unexpected twists and turns. And remember, sometimes, a little bit of clowning around is exactly what the world needs. Okay, here we go. Let's see if we can turn this clown show into something truly spectacular. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales of unexpected twists and turns. And remember, sometimes, a little bit of clowning around is exactly what the world needs. But the world wasn't what I was worried about. It was Amelia. My Amelia. My daughter, who just publicly declared me, her own father, a clown. The humiliation stung, not because of the words themselves, but because of the contempt in her eyes. The dismissal. Years of memories, of building stages and crafting illusions, reduced to a punchline for her social climbing act. That night, sleep evaded me. I tossed and turned, replaying the scene at the country club. Amelia's laughter, the smirks of her friends, the hollowness that had settled in my chest. I wasn't angry, not exactly. Hurt, perhaps. Disappointed, definitely. But beneath it all, a spark ignited. A spark of the old Benny the Great, the showman who could conjure magic from thin air. The next morning, I woke with a plan. Not just any plan, but a masterpiece of meticulously crafted chaos. Amelia was hosting her annual garden party, the highlight of her social calendar. The perfect opportunity to deliver a performance she, and her perfectly curated guests, would never forget. First, the reconnaissance. I needed to assess the battlefield. I drove past Amelia's house, a sprawling colonial mansion with a manicured lawn that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The kind of place where laughter was polite and conversations were whispered. The antithesis of everything I stood for. I parked down the street and observed. Caterers were arriving, setting up tables draped in linen. Florists were arranging elaborate bouquets. The air was thick with the scent of privilege and pretension. Next, the logistics. I needed permits, equipment, and performers. And I needed them fast. Luckily, my phone still held the numbers of some of the most talented, and discreet, individuals in the entertainment industry. A few calls, a little persuasion, and the wheels were in motion. A permit for a community fun fair right outside Amelia's house. Consider it done. A miniature carousel, complete with whimsical painted horses. On its way. A troupe of stilt walkers, jugglers, and a fire breather. Warming up their acts as we spoke. And the piece de resistance, a miniature elephant, perfectly trained and impeccably cared for, courtesy of an old friend who ran a traveling circus. The days leading up to the party were a blur of activity. I was like a conductor leading an orchestra, coordinating every detail, ensuring that everything would come together in a symphony of delightful absurdity. I even dusted off my old ringmaster's outfit, a flamboyant ensemble of red velvet and gold trim. It felt right. Like stepping back into a familiar skin. The day of the party dawned bright and sunny, as if even the heavens were conspiring to add to the spectacle. As Amelia's guests began to arrive, impeccably dressed and radiating an air of self-importance, the first trucks rolled up. The sounds of classical music wafting from Amelia's garden were soon drowned out by the cheerful, if slightly chaotic, music of the circus. I watched from across the street, a mischievous grin spreading across my face. The look on Amelia's face as she surveyed the unfolding scene was priceless. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling before her very eyes, replaced by a spectacle of color, laughter, and unadulterated joy. Her guests, initially bewildered, were quickly captivated. Champagne flutes were abandoned as they flocked to the street to witness the unfolding madness. Finally, Amelia stormed out, her face a mask of fury. "What the hell are you doing?" she screamed, her voice barely audible above the circus music. I straightened my ringmaster's hat, took a deep breath, and approached her, a bucket of popcorn in hand. "I heard you say I was a professional clown, Amelia," I said, my voice calm and steady. "A professional never disappoints his audience. Would you like some popcorn?" The aftermath was interesting. Amelia was, predictably, mortified. Her carefully crafted image was shattered, replaced by the legend of the Tavance Circus. But something unexpected happened. Her husband, a man with a surprisingly good sense of humor, found the whole thing hilarious. He even started referring to me as Benny the Great around his colleagues. And the neighbors? They loved it. The Tavance Circus became a local legend, a testament to the power of laughter and the absurdity of social climbing. But the real reward wasn't the humiliation of Amelia, although I won't deny there was a certain satisfaction in that. It was the rediscovery of my passion. The joy of creating something that brought genuine happiness to others. I started organizing free community festivals for children, using my skills and connections to bring a little magic to those who needed it most. I realized that the joy I brought to hundreds of strangers was far more valuable than the hollow approval of an ungrateful daughter. The experience forced Amelia to confront her own insecurities and her shallow values. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but slowly, surely, she started to see me, not as an embarrassment, but as a person. A person with a rich history, a unique talent, and a genuine desire to make the world a little brighter. So, did I go too far? Maybe. But sometimes, a little bit of clowning around is exactly what it takes to shake things up, to break down walls, and to remind people of what truly matters in life. And sometimes, the greatest act of all is simply being yourself, unapologetically and authentically, even if that means embracing your inner clown. And maybe, just maybe, you'll inspire others to do the same. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a three-ring circus to plan. And hey, if you ever find yourself being called a clown, remember this story. Don't get mad, get even. Get creative. And most importantly, get ready to put on a show. Because life, after all, is a circus. So grab your popcorn, find your seat, and enjoy the ride. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales of unexpected twists and turns. You never know what kind of spectacle life will throw your way next. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales of unexpected twists and turns. You never know what kind of spectacle life will throw your way next. Believe me, I didn't see this one coming. The aftermath of the Vance Circus, as the locals affectionately or perhaps mockingly called it, was complicated. Amelia, bless her heart, was furious. I mean, incandescently, volcanically furious. The kind of fury that could curdle milk at 50 paces. Her meticulously crafted world, her carefully curated image, had been shattered into a million tiny, glittery pieces of popcorn. The silence after her initial outburst was deafening. It hung in the air like the smell of burnt sugar, thick and cloying. I half expected her to spontaneously combust, leaving behind only a perfectly pressed linen dress and a faint scent of expensive perfume. But she didn't. Instead, she retreated into a glacial silence, punctuated only by the occasional withering glare. My son-in-law, however, took it surprisingly well. Robert, the high-powered lawyer, the man who could argue a speeding ticket into a civic award, actually chuckled. He saw the humor in it, the sheer audacity of it all. He even admitted, after a few glasses of vintage Cabernet Sauvignon, that the circus was far more entertaining than the usual garden party fare. He'd always found Amelia's friends a bit stuffy. He enjoyed seeing them slightly discombobulated by a miniature elephant. But the real fallout wasn't with my family. It was with Amelia's social circle, the meticulously maintained network of wealthy neighbors and country club acquaintances. They were intrigued. Initially, there was a period of hushed whispers and sideways glances. Amelia became the subject of gossip, the woman whose father had literally brought the circus to town. But then, something unexpected happened. People started to loosen up. The Vance Circus became a legend, a story told and retold with increasing embellishment. People who had previously been intimidated by Amelia's perfect facade now saw her as human. Flawed, perhaps, but undeniably human. And that made her, in a strange way, more approachable. The meticulously manicured lawns and perfectly coordinated outfit started to seem a little less important. I, meanwhile, became something of a local celebrity. Benny the Great, the retired event planner who staged a circus in his daughter's front yard. People stopped me on the street to shake my hand, to tell me how much they enjoyed the show. The local children treated me like a benevolent wizard, showering me with drawings of elephants and clowns. It was gratifying. But the best part was the reconnection with my passion. Seeing the joy on those children's faces, the unadulterated delight of a free circus, reminded me why I loved what I did. It wasn't about the money, the fame, or the applause. It was about creating moments of wonder, of bringing a little bit of magic into people's lives. So, I started organizing more community events. Small, free festivals for children, with face painting, balloon animals, and, of course, a few of my signature magic tricks. I realized that the joy I brought to hundreds of strangers was far more valuable than the fake approval of an ungrateful daughter. Amelia eventually came around, too. It took time, and a lot of awkward silences, but she eventually realized that my clownish past wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was a part of who I was, a part of what made me, me. She even started bringing her own daughter, my granddaughter, to my little festivals. And seeing the two of them laughing together, watching a magician pull a rabbit out of a hat, made all the drama, all the circus madness, worthwhile. So, what's the lesson here? Maybe it's that revenge, even the spectacularly staged kind, isn't always the answer. Maybe it's that family, no matter how complicated, is worth fighting for. Or maybe it's just that sometimes, a little bit of circus can go a long way. Either way, it taught me a valuable lesson: never underestimate the power of a well-placed clown. And, if you're ever called a clown, just remember, you can always put on a show. What about you? Have you ever had a family feud that went completely off the rails? Share your stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And who knows, maybe your story will inspire my next adventure. Okay, so, where were we? Ah yes, you were itching for another story. And believe me, I have plenty. After all, a lifetime in the entertainment industry tends to generate a few memorable moments. The daughter and the circus incident, well, that's definitely up there. But sometimes, the quiet moments, the ones that don't involve elephants and fire breathers, can be just as revealing. You see, the whole clown thing, it wasn't just about Amelia being ashamed of my past. It was about something deeper, something that had been brewing for years. It was about control. Amelia had always tried to control the narrative, to curate a perfect image of herself and her life. And my showbiz past, as she so delicately put it, didn't quite fit into that picture. She wanted me to be invisible. A quiet, unassuming grandfather who occasionally showed up for holidays and kept his stories to himself. But that's not me. I'm Benny the Great. I'm a showman, a storyteller. It's in my blood. I've spent my life creating spectacles, bringing joy and wonder to audiences around the world. To ask me to suppress that, to deny who I am, well, that's a tall order. And frankly, it's insulting. The thing is, I understood, on some level, where she was coming from. She craved acceptance from her wealthy friends, these people who judged you based on your pedigree and your possessions. It was a world I never really understood, a world of country clubs and cocktail parties, where appearances were everything. But I also knew that true happiness doesn't come from impressing others. It comes from being true to yourself. And that's what Amelia was missing. She was so busy trying to be someone else, someone she thought she should be, that she had lost sight of who she really was. And in her pursuit of perfection, she was pushing away the people who loved her, including me. The circus, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about forcing her to confront that. It was about showing her that life isn't about carefully constructed facades. It's about embracing the unexpected, the messy, the joyful chaos that makes life worth living. It was about reminding her, and maybe even reminding myself, that sometimes, the best way to deal with life's absurdities is to laugh. To put on a show. To be a clown. Of course, the aftermath wasn't exactly smooth sailing. Amelia was furious, humiliated. The Vance circus became the talk of the town, and not in a good way, at least not from her perspective. But slowly, things started to shift. Her husband, surprisingly, found the whole thing hilarious. He saw the absurdity of it all, the sheer audacity of my stunt. And he started to see Amelia's obsession with perfection for what it was, a prison. And Amelia, well, she started to crack. The perfect image she had so carefully cultivated began to crumble. And underneath, something real started to emerge. She started to loosen up, to laugh at herself, to embrace the imperfections that made her human. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, not by a long shot. Our relationship is still complicated. But the circus, it was a catalyst. It forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths, to see each other in a new light. And in the end, that's all you can really ask for. A chance to connect, to understand, to maybe, just maybe, forgive. So, what's the lesson here? Maybe it's that revenge, even the most elaborate and spectacular kind, isn't always the answer. Maybe it's that true happiness comes from embracing your authentic self, flaws and all. Or maybe it's just that a good circus can solve almost any problem. I'm kidding, mostly. The real lesson, I suppose, is that family is complicated. Love is messy. And life is a circus. Now, I've been doing all the talking, what about you? Do you have any crazy family stories? I'm all ears. Share them in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this tale of revenge and redemption, be sure to like and subscribe for more adventures. After all, Benny the Great is always up to something. And if you enjoyed this tale of revenge and redemption, be sure to like and subscribe for more adventures. After all, Benny the Great is always up to something. But the story doesn't quite end there, does it? The fallout, as they say, was substantial. Amelia, bless her heart, didn't take it well. The laughter, the whispers, the social media posts, it all chipped away at that perfect facade she'd so meticulously constructed. You see, for Amelia, image wasn't just important, it was everything. It defined her, validated her, and, in her mind, elevated her above the rabble. And I, her own father, had just pulled the rug out from under her perfectly manicured feet. The first few weeks were frosty. Silent dinners, slammed doors, and enough passive-aggressive comments to make a therapist weep. She accused me of deliberately trying to ruin her life, of embarrassing her in front of her friends, of being, well, a clown. Again. But this time, there was a different edge to it. Not the dismissive, patronizing tone from the country club, but genuine, raw anger. And beneath the anger, I saw something else, hurt. That's when it hit me. My little stunt, however satisfying, had gone too far. I'd aimed for a playful jab, but landed a knockout punch. I'd wanted to teach her a lesson about humility and appreciating her roots, but all I'd managed to do was inflict pain. And that, I realized, wasn't what I wanted. I'm not a vindictive man, despite what the circus incident might suggest. I just wanted to be respected, to be seen for who I was, not for who my daughter wanted me to be. So, I did the only thing I could think of, I apologized. Not a half-hearted, "I'm sorry you feel that way," kind of apology, but a genuine, heartfelt admission of wrongdoing. I told her I understood that my actions had been hurtful and embarrassing, that I hadn't considered the consequences of my grand gesture. I told her I loved her, and that all I wanted was to be a part of her life, without having to hide who I was. The conversation that followed was difficult. Tears were shed, accusations were hurled, and old wounds were reopened. But it was also honest. We talked about her insecurities, her fear of not fitting in, her desire to protect her children from the perceived embarrassment of my past. And I talked about my own insecurities, my fear of being seen as irrelevant, my longing to be appreciated for my accomplishments. Slowly, painstakingly, we began to rebuild. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments when I thought we'd never bridge the gap. But we kept talking, kept listening, kept trying to understand each other's perspectives. And then, something amazing happened. Amelia started to embrace my showbiz past. She even started telling stories about my crazy adventures to her friends, not with shame or embarrassment, but with a hint of pride. She realized that my life, however unconventional, was actually pretty interesting. And I, in turn, learned to be more sensitive to her feelings, to be more mindful of the image she was trying to project. The Vance Circus, as it became known, is still talked about in the neighborhood. It's a legend, a cautionary tale, and a source of amusement. But it's also a reminder of the power of forgiveness, the importance of communication, and the enduring bond between a father and his daughter. And who knows, maybe one day, I'll even teach my granddaughter a few magic tricks. After all, Benny the Great never truly retires. He just takes a break between acts. The circus, you see, is always in my blood. It's part of who I am, and now, thankfully, my daughter understands that too. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about acceptance, and ultimately, love. That's the greatest show of all. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about acceptance, and ultimately, love. That's the greatest show of all. But let me tell you, getting to that point wasn't exactly a walk in the park. After the circus stunt, things were tense, to say the least. Amelia wouldn't speak to me for days. My son-in-law, bless his heart, tried to play mediator, but even his usually unflappable demeanor seemed a little shaken. The neighborhood, well, they were talking. And not in hushed whispers, either. The Vance Circus, as they called it, was the talk of every bridge game, every book club meeting, every darn dog walk. You see, Amelia had cultivated this image of suburban perfection. The manicured lawn, the perfectly coordinated outfits, the carefully curated social circle, it was all meticulously crafted. And I, with my elephants and fire breathers, had bulldozed right through it. I knew I'd shaken things up, but I hadn't fully grasped the extent of the damage until I saw the look on her face that day. Pure, unadulterated fury mixed with a deep, almost primal humiliation. I started to question myself. Had I gone too far? Was it really worth it to embarrass my own daughter, even if she had called me a clown in front of her friends? The doubt gnawed at me. I paced around my quiet house, the silence amplifying my guilt. I replayed the scene at the country club over and over in my head. Her dismissive laugh, the way her friends joined in, the sting of her words. But then I also saw her face at the party, the raw pain beneath the anger, and I felt a pang of regret. I decided I needed to talk to her. Not to apologize, not exactly, but to explain. To try and make her understand why I did what I did. It took me a few days to work up the courage, but eventually, I drove over to her house. The perfect, manicured house. I parked down the street, took a deep breath, and walked up the perfectly paved driveway. She answered the door, her eyes red and puffy. I could see she'd been crying. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice tight. "Can we talk, Amelia?" I said gently. She hesitated for a moment, then sighed and opened the door wider. I stepped inside. The house was immaculate, as always. Everything was in its place, perfectly arranged. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic circus I had unleashed on her perfectly ordered world. We sat in the living room, an awkward silence hanging between us. Finally, I spoke. "I know I embarrassed you," I said. "And I'm sorry for that. But I need you to understand, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about respect. About feeling like I was being dismissed, like my life, my experiences, meant nothing to you." She looked at me, her expression softening slightly. I wanted you to fit in," she said. "I wanted my friends to see you as, normal." "Normal?" I chuckled. "Amelia, I've never been normal. And frankly, I don't want to be. I've lived a life full of adventure, of excitement, of creating magic for people. And I'm proud of that. I'm not ashamed of being a clown, as you so eloquently put it. Clowns bring joy to people. They make them laugh. Is that really so terrible?" She didn't answer. She just looked down at her hands, twisting a tissue in her fingers. "I know you're trying to protect your image, Amelia," I continued. "But you can't let that image define you. You can't let it dictate who you are and how you treat the people you love. I'm your father. I love you. And I want you to be proud of who you are, all of you, not just the perfectly polished version you show to your friends." The silence stretched out again, but this time it felt different. Less tense, more thoughtful. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said. "I was being awful. I was ashamed of you, and I shouldn't have been." I reached out and took her hand. "It's okay, Amelia," I said. "We all make mistakes. The important thing is that we learn from them. And you know what? She did learn. It took time, but she started to see me, the real me, not just the clown she was trying to hide. She started to listen to my stories, to laugh at my jokes, to appreciate the crazy, wonderful life I had lived. And I, in turn, started to understand her, her insecurities, her need for acceptance. The Vance Circus became a family joke, a reminder of the day we both learned a valuable lesson. And you know what else? Amelia even started bringing her friends to the community festivals I organized. She even helped out sometimes, handing out popcorn and laughing with the kids. So, what's the moral of the story? Maybe it's that sometimes, the greatest shows are the ones that teach us something about ourselves. Maybe it's that family is more important than image. Or maybe it's just that a little bit of clowning around can bring a family closer together. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more crazy stories from my life. Okay, so where were we? Oh yeah, Amelia's face. Picture this, pure, unadulterated rage. The kind of rage that only comes from having your meticulously crafted reality crumble before your very eyes. I mean, this was her masterpiece, this garden party. Years of social climbing, perfectly manicured lawns, and strategically placed floral arrangements, all culminating in this one afternoon. And there I was, Benny the Great, turning it into a three-ring circus. She stormed towards me, a whirlwind of expensive linen and suppressed fury. The classical music, which had been so carefully selected to create an atmosphere of sophisticated elegance, was now completely drowned out by the oompapa of the circus band. The aroma of delicate canapés was overpowered by the sweet, irresistible scent of popcorn. It was glorious. "What the hell are you doing?" she shrieked, her voice barely audible above the din. I just smiled, the kind of smile that only a man who has spent his life orchestrating chaos can muster. I knew I was pushing her buttons, but honestly, she had it coming. Years of subtle digs, of trying to erase my past, of being ashamed of the man who raised her. It all came down to this moment. "I said you called me a professional clown, Amelia," I replied, my voice calm and even. A professional never disappoints his audience. I gestured grandly towards the spectacle surrounding us. "Would you like some popcorn, Amelia?" The look on her face was priceless. She wanted to scream, to tear her hair out, to disappear into the perfectly trimmed hedges. But she couldn't. Not in front of her friends. Not in front of the people whose approval she craved so desperately. So she stood there, frozen, a deer caught in the headlights of a runaway circus train. The aftermath, as you can imagine, was interesting. Amelia became the talk of the town, but not in the way she had hoped. The Vance Circus became a local legend, a story whispered with amusement at cocktail parties and over the garden fence. Some of her friends were horrified, of course. But others? They secretly loved it. They were tired of the same old boring parties, the same predictable conversations. The circus was a breath of fresh air, a moment of unexpected joy in their otherwise meticulously planned lives. Even Amelia's husband, Richard, found the whole thing hilarious. He had always suspected that Amelia took herself a little too seriously, and he appreciated the dose of levity I had injected into their lives. He even started calling me Benny the Magnificent, much to Amelia's chagrin. But the real consequence, the one that truly mattered, was the impact it had on Amelia's perfect image. It was shattered, irrevocably. And you know what? She was better for it. Stripped of her pretense, she was forced to confront the things that really mattered, family, connection, and a little bit of laughter. For me, it was a revelation. I had spent so long trying to be the quiet, respectable retiree that Amelia wanted me to be. I had suppressed my creativity, my passion, my very essence. But the circus reminded me of who I truly was, Benny the Great, the master of spectacle, the orchestrator of joy. I started organizing free community festivals for children, small-scale productions that brought smiles to the faces of hundreds of strangers. I realized that the joy I brought to them was far more valuable than the fake approval of an ungrateful daughter. Amelia and I, well, we're still working on things. She's slowly starting to understand that my showbiz past isn't something to be ashamed of, but rather something to be celebrated. And I'm learning to be a little more patient, a little less theatrical. So, what's the moral of the story? Maybe it's that you should never underestimate a retired event planner with a grudge. Or maybe it's that sometimes, the best way to deal with a difficult situation is to turn it into a circus. But I think it's something deeper than that. I think it's about embracing who you are, flaws and all, and never letting anyone dim your sparkle. Don't let anyone make you feel like a clown, unless you're the one holding the popcorn. And that's my story. What about you? Have you ever had a moment where you felt underestimated, where you had to prove yourself? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more crazy stories from my life. Maybe next time, I'll tell you about the time I accidentally set a flock of pigeons loose at a royal wedding, but that's a story for another day. Thanks for listening, and remember, always keep the show going. Okay, so where were we? Ah yes, the Vance Circus. The aftermath, as you can imagine, was chaotic. Amelia, bless her heart, didn't quite see the humor in it. Her perfectly curated world, her pristine image, had been invaded by clowns, elephants, and the overwhelming scent of popcorn. It was disruptive, to say the least. But here's the thing about disruption, sometimes, it's exactly what you need. Amelia's reaction, initially, was volcanic. Red-faced screaming, accusations hurled like darts, the whole 9 yards. My son-in-law, bless his pragmatic soul, actually found the whole thing quite amusing. He'd always suspected the country club crowd was a bit stuffy. He even snuck out to get a snow cone. The neighborhood, initially shocked, quickly embraced the spectacle. Kids were laughing, parents were mingling, and the air was filled with a kind of joyful chaos that Amelia's meticulously planned garden party could never have achieved. It was a real party, not just a display. Of course, the gossip mill went into overdrive. "Did you hear about Amelia Vance's party?" became the phrase on everyone's lips. Some whispered judgments, others chuckled behind their hands, but most, I think, were secretly delighted by the sheer audacity of it all. Amelia's perfect image, that carefully constructed facade, had indeed been shattered. But what rose from the ashes, I believe, was something a little more real. A little more human. In the days that followed, things were tense. Amelia and I didn't speak for a while. My granddaughter, however, loved the circus. She kept asking when the elephant was coming back. And that, more than anything, softened my heart. The truth is, I never intended to truly humiliate Amelia. My intention was to remind her. Remind her of where she came from, of the joy and spontaneity that she seemed to have traded for social acceptance. Eventually, Amelia did come around. Slowly, grudgingly, but she came around. She admitted, through gritted teeth, that the circus was memorable. And that, perhaps, she'd been taking herself a little too seriously. The Vance Circus became a local legend, a cautionary tale whispered at country club gatherings, a reminder that sometimes, the greatest performances are the ones that break the rules. And me? Well, I rediscovered my passion. I started organizing free community festivals, bringing joy and laughter to children who might not otherwise experience it. I realized that the joy I brought to hundreds of strangers was far more valuable than the fleeting approval of a few socialites. Looking back, I don't regret a thing. Did I go too far? Maybe. But sometimes, a little bit of chaos is necessary to shake things up, to remind us what truly matters. And sometimes, the best way to teach someone a lesson is to put on a show. So, what's the takeaway from all this? Perhaps it's this: don't be afraid to be yourself, even if it means being a little unconventional. Embrace your quirks, your passions, your inner clown. Because in the end, it's those things that make you unique, that make you, you. And never, ever underestimate the power of a well-timed circus. Remember, life is a stage, and we are all merely players. So, play your part with passion, with humor, and with a little bit of mischief. And if someone calls you a clown, well, maybe it's time to put on a show. Now, I'm curious. What's the most outrageous thing you've ever done to stand up for yourself or someone you love? Share your stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And who knows, maybe you'll inspire me with my next performance. And if you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more tales of revenge, redemption, and the occasional circus. Maybe next time, I'll tell you about the time I accidentally set a flock of pigeons loose at a royal wedding, but that's a story for another day. Thanks for listening, and remember, always keep the show going. Don't let anyone dim your sparkle, and remember to embrace the unexpected, because sometimes, the greatest stories are the ones you never saw coming. And most importantly, never underestimate the power of a good laugh, especially when it's at the expense of someone who takes themselves a little too seriously. So go out there, be a little bit mischievous, and make your own story worth telling. The world needs a little more joy, a little more laughter, and a whole lot more circus.